Alex Wolz here with Ryan Gregware reporting on the latest in the New York Yankees, a saga that just keeps on getting crazier and crazier. And Ryan, we've got another big story here to break down now as the coronavirus makes its return for the second time this season for the Yankees. I know there's a lot we're going to talk about here about what happened, about the fallout of it. We're going to start off by just first trying to do our best analyzing what happened because it's been a really crazy saga, starting with yesterday's postponement in the first game against the Red Sox, and now we know a little bit more about the situation. So I'll get right into it, Ryan. Jump in at any point along the way because there's a lot here and I might mess something up. There's just so much to get right. A lot of moving parts, a fluid situation, as Brian Cashman calls it. And I think really this all dates back to July 10th when Jonathan Loáisiga goes down on the COVID IL, and you and I kind of said, okay, this is what it is, a little bit out of nowhere, but is what it is. We go ahead, yeah.
I'm just gonna say at that point we kept moving. We didn't even know if he had COVID.
Yeah,
it was just that he was on the list. He could have been exposed or something. It was annoying from the Yankees perspective because obviously Loáisiga has been huge, but you didn't make a big deal of it and you just kept chugging along.
Yeah, and Loáisiga, as you mentioned, such a key piece for this team. He had been almost taken on that closer role a little bit with Aroldis Chapman struggles, but Aroldis Chapman, of course, gets named an All-Star. So does Garrett Cole. So does Aaron Judge. They all go to All-Star Weekend, or really All-Star Week, out in Denver and enjoy that. And it's really a celebration of baseball at that time. And we come back here now. The only game on the slate on Thursday, which I know you have some problems with, but the only game on the slate on Thursday against the Red Sox. Looks like everything's going as planned. I get to the ballpark. We find out all of a sudden the Yankees aren't taking batting practice, something that's a little bit suspicious out of an abundance of caution. And we find out later as Brian Cashman speaks to the media, Aaron Boone speaks to the media, that there's 3 guys testing positive for coronavirus: Wandy Peralta, Jonathan Loáisiga, and Nestor Cortez, all 3 valuable pieces, and 3 more pending tests as well, which we now have found out are positive to Aaron Judge, Kyle Higashioka, and Gio Urshela. So now 6 positives among the organization, and they're still planning to play today on Friday. We're recording this on Friday before the game. And Ryan, just such a saga, as you mentioned, so many important pieces going down here for the Yankees. Just what is your kind of reaction to everything that's happened and coming out of All-Star break, and just how crazy of a situation this has been for the Yankees?
Yeah, first off, thank you for having me on. I flat out invited myself on because
Hey, anytime.
I want to talk about this to you. And wild, crazy is a great way to sum up the Yankees season and this situation because it keeps getting more and more complicated. At first, we thought it was just a few players, whatever. And with Aaron Judge testing positive, this opens a can of worms here because he was all over All-Star Weekend. You sent me a tweet, a awful visual looking back of him walking out Hank Aaron's lovely wife, and obviously implications there. And, you have to pray that him testing positive is a new development. It's not something he had. I'm sure he was getting tested at the All-Star game, stuff like that.
I don't know, because so they tested all the unvaccinated players at the All-Star game. Those all came back negative, but we don't know about the vaccinated players. But we could presume, yeah.
But we don't know if Aaron Judge is vaccinated. That's the other layer of it. I think the one thing that you missed, and maybe this has changed, but I think Brian Cashman confirmed that there was someone confirmed, Buster Only, I think there was 1 guaranteed vaccinated, 1 guaranteed unvaccinated. That was from the original 3 tests, which were
the original 3, there was 2 Johnson & Johnsons and 1 of a 2-shot vaccine. So the original 3 were vaccinated, but Cashman made it clear that most, but not all of these cases were of vaccinated individuals. And there's some rumors out there that one of the unvaccinated individuals is symptomatic, but has not been confirmed. So we're not going to get into that, but there are some rumors out there about that too.
Okay. Yeah. So we don't really know 100%. We do know confirmed though, I believe that there is an unvaccinated.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. So that's what I was trying to get at there. So yeah, there's a lot of weird parts here. And if you look at it, obviously from the health perspective, it's glad that no reports out that anyone's seriously, sick or anything. That's obviously takes the forefront in this situation. So I don't want to just gloss over that. But then you do have to look at it from a baseball perspective. And the Yankees are a team right now that is playing their most critical stretch of the season. Nobody can deny that. You play 7 of 9 versus the Red Sox coming up. And now they're going to be without even more help. Right now it's 6. We're waiting for these rapids. It could get worse. We could go a week without playing. The situation can't really get better off the bat. You're going to have to play now. If you do play, which I think we all hope so. And it's weird because you talked about how I didn't want yesterday's game to happen. I really thought the Yankees and Red Sox deserved the extra day, like every other team. But you do look at it from a baseball perspective. You're coming off the momentum of the All-Star break. Baseball is in the national news again. It was at the forefront. Everyone's talking about Shohei Ohtani and stuff. It was nice to have the only sport, only game, no basketball, Yankees, Red Sox, classic rivalry, primetime game. It was going to get big ratings. So from that perspective, it's the last thing the MLB wanted. I think we have to make that very clear. This is a nightmare scenario for the MLB. We texted that yesterday. Yeah. It really is a nightmare scenario, especially if we have to start putting these all-stars in protocol. I believe Rafael Devers, you could clarify this, wasn't able to speak to the media yesterday
Yeah,
because
so the situation there has been very interesting because on one hand, Devers said he was not allowed to speak in the pregame media availability because he was asked to enter into protocol with Judge testing positive, obviously. Now, the good development, I think, is that in the time since, apparently every All-Star has been tested and those have come back negative so far. And that tonight's game obviously planning to go on as planned with the Red Sox rapid test coming back negative, and they obviously had multiple All-Stars. So there are some benefits here, but like you said, there's just so much still up in the air.
yeah, and you texted me this yesterday. I saw some other tweets. The Red Sox were practicing on the field even after the postponement. So,
And
weird.
media were allowed to go down on the field. So it was a very interesting situation. And the media is also allowed on the field today. So there does seem to be some confidence that the situation is kind of getting better now that those players have been removed from the player population. But still, like we said, we just don't know.
Yeah, and so when you look at it again from baseball perspective, you look at the bullpen first off, which with Chapman struggles, it was already weak. And now you're without Loizaga, who I'd say has been their most consistent, best reliever all season. You look at that game versus Houston, game 3, that series, you're going for the sweep. Not having him was critical because you had to run out of gas Chad Green, who didn't have it, got rocked. You lose the game. You're without Nestor Cortez, who's on the IL, the COVID list, and Mike King is on the actual IL, those were your two long reliever spot starters. They have really good stuff, and especially Cortez had really dominated as of late. He had some huge games versus the Mets and Astros, so not having him is huge. Obviously, Darren O'Day's on the IL. Wandy Peralta is on the COVID IL, and so with all these question marks, Zach Britton coming back off the IL, but what is he? We have no clue if he'll be healthy. The Yankees are in a really bad spot right here. There's no sugarcoating it. From a health perspective, awful spot. And from an on-the-field perspective, really bad spot. We mentioned Aaron Judge. Gio Urshela, too. They won't have him this series. And this is one that the Yankees really couldn't afford to lose. And being without your objectively best player, best reliever, 2 huge spot starters all year, it's going to hurt them in this series.
And Darren O'Day, another one of those guys on the IL as well, you mentioned, was such a guy that you were so excited to get back to help the Yankees. And I do think it really is kind of a tumultuous time for the Yankees because the difference between this and the previous COVID outbreak is the previous one was obviously exclusively among staff, which meant they were able to proceed, they were able to play. This one among seems like purely players, which makes the situation a lot more complicated. And like you mentioned for the Yankees, they're heading into such an important stretch here, not having won a single game against the Red Sox so far this season. And I texted this to somebody else that this feels very much like a series you need to salvage something out of, or else your season is really going to start spiraling in the wrong direction with how much of a gap they have to make up both in the division and the wild card's more obtainable. But you have to start winning these division games. And like you mentioned, it's against the Red Sox, it's against the Rays, the 2 teams they've struggled with the most. And now you're coming into it really shorthanded. As you mentioned, Jonathan Loizaga has been so key this year. Nestor Cortez and King, guys who have ended up starting games here and there and really been solid throughout. And now you're missing your best bat, your most consistent bat all year. I think if you take anything out of this series, even if it's a game or two, with how difficult the circumstances are, you really can't complain if you're the Yankees because you have every card stacked against you right now against the Red Sox team that, like you said, took batting practice yesterday. They're moving on all cylinders, and the Yankees really coming into this slugging into this one for 2 reasons, both for the IL, as you mentioned, and now for the COVID IL. And you can even imagine just the mindset of the team isn't in the right place now, not having to get the appropriate preparation time, not even knowing who's going to be on the field. So just so many questions. And I think for the Yankees, I'm curious for you, Ryan, if you look at this series now with the way it looks, you have these 6 guys out, you come into tonight, 3 games, and then obviously you head into the Rays and then over to Boston, a couple games against Philly as well. How do you think this changes what the rotation might look like? You mentioned that they've kind of gone back and forth on that, how it changes what your expectations are for the Yankees coming into this important stretch.
Yeah, it changes a lot. The rotation, obviously, we don't have everything confirmed right now. And even with the roster moves, actually, that's another important thing before I get into your question.
Oh, yes.
Trey Emergy did get called up confirmed before the COVID got, too serious. He was guaranteed going to be here. He's a 960 OPS in AAA. Fans have been calling for him to get up to the big leagues all year because all he's done is hit. And you've had 2 positions left in center field where all they've done is not hit. So you've had him guaranteed coming up. Hoy Park, I believe, is coming up. There have been weird conflicting reports on the taxi squad. I don't know. I saw multiple things. I think he is coming up, though.
Some say called up, some said a taxi squad. I think we can presume he might show up now with the depth that they need now.
He is a shortstop by trade, but the last month or so, he began flirting in center field, began learning that position. I think that was the Yankees had in mind. This isn't even a COVID thing. I think they had plans for these guys.
Without Clint Frazier, too. Should mention that.
Frazier with Vertigo, obviously.
And Duhar, another one.
Yep. And so these guys are going to need to be huge. There's no they don't get an adjustment period. We saw Chris Gittins really didn't get a fair shot. And these guys won't get a 10-game stretch to kind of get comfortable. They will have to produce right away because you talked about the expectations, and it's unfair to expect the Yankees to win these series, but they simply need to. And so, I'm obviously cover the Yankees. I'm a fan though, obviously as well. And so I don't care what the expectations are. They need to figure out a way to win these games because they put themselves in such a hole when they were at more full strength that now when you go through a stretch in your season where you're without an Aaron Judge and your best relievers and all these question marks, you can't afford to have a crappy 14-game stretch here because this is your season. You don't have the luxury of having a built-in, lead like the Red Sox do right now. If this was the Red Sox, we'd be having a different conversation because they would just have to kind of stay afloat. They're up at 8 games on the Yankees. They won't have to play with that same sense of urgency, but the Yankees do. And so the expectations, obviously, you don't expect them to win these series because even at full strength, you can't really argue the Yankees are better than the Red Sox, 0-6 against them this year, but they have to. There's no really beating around the bush here. The Yankees have to win these games if they want to be seriously contenders this year.
And as you mentioned, it's a really interesting time now because for the Yankees, the reason why they've been so successful in the past teams is that next man up mentality. Now you're almost being asked to be put in the same situation and for a really unfortunate situation, but now you're being asked to do the same thing. And really with a baseball season, that's just the way it is, whether it's one way or another, whether it's a COVID-19 IL in a situation like this, whether it's because of injuries, they're going to need guys to step up. And, you have guys on this roster that we know are capable of playing better. Aaron Judge, one of those guys that's shown that all year, but now you're just going to have to expect other guys to do that, whether that comes in the form of the guys already there, whether that comes in the form of calling people up who we've asked for fans have asked for quite some time, or whether making a move at the deadline. We saw Jock Peterson on the move, kind of getting that going the other day. And it's a question now of if the Yankees are going to do something, because you think about the COVID-19 IL, 10 days you might be without these guys. And if you're without that for such a valuable stretch, don't be surprised if the Yankees start making some moves, a lot of moves to this roster in order to salvage something from, like you mentioned, Ryan, such an important stretch for one reason or another. So we'll have a lot of reporting on this throughout the weekend. I'll be there tonight if the game happens. Ryan, you'll be there Sunday, I believe. We'll talk about this on Nosebleeds next week. But just if you're looking at this weekend, if you just have a final thought on it, what you want to see from the Yankees in this current state to be almost satisfied, or what you think they need to do, what would that be?
I've had this mentality the last few weeks now. I think you agree with it. It's just take 2 out of 3.
Yep.
Every single series. We don't know what the makeup game is going to be. It was supposed to be 4 game. It's 3 right now. Take 2 of 3. You probably shouldn't based on the talent that's going to be on the field, but you got to steal a game here and there. You take 2 of 3. They have to keep doing that. It's very unrealistic to think the Yankees will sweep. The one, spin zone I'll have that's positive, just to wrap it up, is we've said this so much, but if there was something to rally these guys, It's something like this. All the adversity they are facing right now is real. It's not fabricated by anyone else. It is objectively real adversity. So maybe with their backs against the wall like they've never been before, they can fight back. And so simple message is win this series.
Well said. And the first game will be tonight, Friday, 7:00 p.m. Yankees, Red Sox. And we'll see what happens. We'll have a lot more for you throughout the weekend. Alex Wolz, Ryan Gregware reporting on the New York Yankees.